Hello, my name is Carcavius Preston, and this is my presentation on IMAPS and DNS. And of course, the content will include me discussing these two and their hardening recommendations. So, starting with IMAPS, which stands for Internet Message Access Protocol Secure. This is a protocol that is located in the application layer of the network communications model. Like most email protocols, this is designed to receive emails and messages from the mail server as well as perform as a sort of remote access mailbox protocol. While the protocol receives sensitive information, it also allows users to gain access to the information on its own on their own devices, such as smartphones, laptops, and computers. With SSL and TLS, this protocol is able to encrypt the messages sent from the mail server to the recipient, making the communication between the servers secure in integrity and confidentiality. Now, how IMAPS specifically works is within five ways: communication, establishment, SSL/TLS, handshake, um, the IMAPS communication, secure transmission, and connection termination. So, with the establishment, it establishes a secure connection with the email server using SSL/TLS, and this typically happens on port 993, the default port of IMAPS. With Handshake, um, the client and server perform an SSL/TLS handshake, which involves exchanging certificates, verifying identities, and establishing a secure session key for encrypting the communication. But speaking of the communication, once the connection is established, the client and server communicate using the standard protocol, and the client can perform various operations such as listing available mailboxes, searching for specific emails, and retrieving email messages and managing email folders. So with secure transmission, all IMAPS communication, including the email content and any authentication credentials, is encrypted using a session key established during the SSL/TLS handshake. This ensures the unauthorized parties cannot intercept or read the email messages during transmission. And finally, with communication termination, when the client is done retrieving emails, the connection is then terminated and the session key is discarded. So, the difference between IMAP and IMAPS is while IMAPS uses SSL and TLS to encrypt the communication between the client and server, IMAP does not secure messages. As well as the default port number for IMAP is 143. The port number for IMAPS is 993. And so I want to discuss about how to configure IMAPS. And so I'm going to use Ubuntu for an example. So let me just log on to here, go to my terminal. So first, what you want to do is install Dovecot. And it is with this command right here. This. And next, put in this command right here, in which it will install it. Okay. Next, you'd want to configure Dovecot, and it is with this command right here. All right. Next, you'd want to restart it by using sudo service dovecot restart. Okay, and next you want to test it using the telnet connection, and that is this right here. Localhost. All right, and just like that, you have configured it. So, now, hardening recommendations include keeping the email server software and firmware updated, and by doing this, the updates and patches will keep the mail server software secure from being vulnerable, and it prevents threats exploiting and penetrating the software to gain access. Next recommendation is allowing secure SSH authentication to manage the mail server, and allowing this will manage the server and will keep the user secure without relying on passwords or usernames. Finally, another recommendation is wisely selecting who should gain access to the mail server. And by doing this, this can prevent the occurrence of attackers gaining access to any sensitive information. Next, I want to talk about DNS, which stands for Domain Name Server. And this is a naming server that is responsible for translating names into IP addresses. The server directs users to the correct requested server by resolving the domain to its IP addresses. Domain also assists browsers to load resources from the internet. And this standard port number for the DNS is 53. And so talking about the 4 servers that DNS requires includes DNS recursor, the root name server, TLD name server, and authoritative name server. So with the recursor, it is a server designed to receive queries from client machines through applications such as web browsers. And typically, the recursor is then responsible for making additional requests in order to satisfy the client's DNS query. With the name server, it typically serves as a reference to other more specific locations. With the name server, it can be thought as a specific rack of books in a library. And so this name server is the next step in the search for specific IP addresses, and it hosts the last portion of the host name. For example, the TLD server for any thing ending with .com would be .com. So authoritative name server would be the last stop in the name server query, and if the name server has access to the requested record, it will return the IP address from the requested host name back to the DNS recursor that made the initial request. Additional features for DNS would also include response filtering, DNS caches, and private DNS. Oh, And I forgot to talk about the how to configure DNS. So um, one way to do it, and I'll do it with Linux again. And so let me just make a new one right here. Okay, so what you'd want to do is install bind, right? And so it would be this command right here. Okay. And next you would want to edit the bind configuration file, create zone files, and enable the bind service and test it using NS lookup or dig. All right. Finally, discussing about the hardening recommendations for DNS would include having an on-site backup for it, which by enabling this, all operations on the server will be backed up and will be able to perform efficiently. And it will also ensure that the server is kept on a regular frequency. Next recommendation includes turning off recursion on the authoritative servers. And by doing this, the servers can speed reduction and prevent more traffic from occurring in the DNS server. Finally, keeping the DNS server up to date would reduce the likelihood of attackers from finding vulnerabilities and exploiting them. And it will also ensure that the DNS server will be protected from possible threats. And here are my references, and that concludes this presentation. Thank you.